August 12, 1972, the Las Vegas Hilton showroom was packed with more than 1,900 fans, cameras flashing, sequins shimmering under the spotlight. Then, in the middle of Elvis's third song, something happened that froze the entire room. A wheelchair jammed in the aisle, and what the king chose to do next changed that night forever. The Hilton showroom in Las Vegas had a glow all its own. Red velvet curtains framed the stage, while gold and amber lights poured down like warm desert sunlight. Cigarette smoke curled slowly toward the ceiling, mixing with the scent of cologne and spilled whiskey. Every table was packed shoulder to shoulder, each chair filled with someone who had waited weeks, maybe months. For this night, it was August 12, 1972. Elvis Presley's residency at the Hilton had already become the stuff of legend. By that summer, he was performing 2 shows a night, sometimes 7 days a week, and still every seat sold out. That evening was no exception, minus 1,900 fans packed tight into the cavernous showroom. Their anticipation almost a sound of its own. Backstage, the orchestra tuned. Brass warmed up with staccato bursts, strings hummed. The percussionist tapped the rims of his drums like thunder waiting in the distance. On stage, the microphone stood ready, its black cord coiled like a resting snake. Then the lights dipped. A hush fell, that first collective intake of breath that happens only at the start of something monumental. Elvis appeared in a white jumpsuit studded with red and gold jewels, the spotlight catching every sparkle as if he carried his own constellation. The room erupted. Shouts, whistles, and clapping rumbled through the Hilton walls. Women held scarves high, hoping he might take one, kiss it, and hand it back. Men craned their necks, cameras ready, eager to capture proof that they were here, that they saw the king in person. Among them sat Marlene Carter, a lifelong fan from California. Marlene had been bound to her wheelchair after an illness in her 20s, but that hadn't dimmed her spirit. She had saved for months to make this trip with her daughter, Anna, who now guided the chair carefully along the crowded side aisle. For Marlene, this wasn't just another concert. This was her pilgrimage. As the opening number blasted, Elvis's voice soared over the orchestra. The showroom became a thunderstorm of applause. Waiters darted between tables with trays of drinks, heads ducking to avoid blocking views. The air vibrated with music, light, and unfiltered joy. Yet through all the glitter and noise, Marlene's eyes never left the stage. She leaned forward in her chair, hands gripping the armrests, heart racing with every beat of the drums. For years she had played his records alone in her room, imagining moments like this. Now, only a few dozen feet away, Elvis Presley was real, breathing, singing, moving with that unmistakable sway. She whispered to Anna, her voice breaking with excitement, "I can't believe it. He's right there." The crowd roared again as Elvis launched into his third song of the set. Every note carried weight, every gesture drew waves of cheers. But as the music swelled, another sound emerged, the metallic squeak of wheels straining against a carpet. Marlene and Anna were still trying to edge closer, but the aisle was narrow, and the sea of bodies pressing inward made progress nearly impossible. Most people didn't notice at first, but soon the quiet frustration of one fan would become the heartbeat of the entire night. What could possibly happen in the middle of such a flawless show that would bring the Hilton showroom to a standstill? Elvis's voice thundered through the speakers as the orchestra surged into Proud Mary. Horns blared, drums pounded, and the audience clapped in rhythm, their energy bouncing off the walls like heat waves. People stood at their tables, some dancing in place, others snapping photographs, lost in the momentum of the show. Then it happened. The squeak of Marlene's wheelchair wheels grew sharper, cutting against the music. Anna pushed harder, but the chair jammed in the thick carpet halfway down the aisle. A leg of one nearby table blocked the way, and rows of fans had pulled their chairs close, leaving no room to maneuver. The moment stretched painfully. Anna tried angling the chair sideways, but it wouldn't budge. The music roared, but to Marlene it felt suddenly distant. She clutched the armrests, her knuckles white. Her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. Around her, some fans turned. A man at a nearby table frowned, muttering about blocking the view. A woman whispered, "She can't get through." Security noticed. One guard near the front gestured sharply for Marlene and Anna to stay back, to wait until after the song. His hand motion was firm, the message unmistakable: don't interrupt the show. But Anna's eyes welled with tears as she whispered back to her mother, "I'll try again, just hold on." The contrast was stark on stage. Elvis drove the song forward with sweat on his brow, his voice rich and powerful. In the aisle, Marlene sat stuck, her dream slipping away. How many of us have found ourselves caught between a system that says stay in your place and a heart that longs to move closer? As the band hit the chorus, the clapping faltered in their section of the room. People craned their necks to see what was happening in the aisle. Some leaned back to make space, but others shrugged, unwilling to disturb their perfect view of the king. A ripple of unease spread. Marlene lowered her head, blinking hard, her dream night tilting toward humiliation. The wheelchair wasn't just stuck in carpet, it was stuck in judgment, in rules, in the rigid shape of an aisle that wasn't built for her. Anna tried again, her voice urgent. "Please, she just wants to see." The guard shook his head, one hand still outstretched to block the path. For a moment, it seemed inevitable. The show would go on. The music would drown out this quiet struggle. And no one would remember the woman caught in the aisle, but in the glare of the spotlight. Elvis's eyes swept the crowd and lingered. Would the king of rock and roll notice one fan trapped in the shadows? And if he did, what would he choose to do? The orchestra pressed on, horns slicing the smoky air, drums pounding like a relentless heartbeat. Yet, in the back corner of the showroom, focus had shifted. A pocket of stillness formed where Marlene's chair remained wedged. Half turned, her daughter's face, tight with strained dot fans nearby, muttered. One man leaned toward his wife, whispering, "They shouldn't let her try to come through now." Another woman shook her head, murmuring, "She's waited her whole life, just let her through." The tension spread like fire along dry grass. To some, this was a minor inconvenience in a flawless show. To others, it was a test of compassion. On stage, Elvis wiped sweat from his brow with a white scarf, then tossed it into eager hands. But his eyes, scanning the room with instinctive sharpness, caught the flicker of motion in the aisle. His gaze lingered. Marlene felt it. She straightened in her chair, hope colliding with fear. Could he really see her amid nearly 2,000 faces? Anna tugged at the wheelchair again. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking. "We came all this way." The guard stood his ground, jaw set, scanning for approval from a supervisor near the wall. Rules were rules, and the show was supposed to move without interruption. To him, compassion risked disorder. To Marlene, order meant erasure. Isn't it strange how one person's protection can feel like another's prison? The crowd's mood fractured. Some cheered louder, hoping to drown the tension. Others fell silent, eyes darting between the blocked aisle and the king on stage. The Hilton showroom, usually a temple of joy, was suddenly split. Elvis, still mid-song, faltered for half a beat, barely noticeable to the casual ear, but to those who knew him, it was clear. He had seen, and now he had to decide. The song powered forward, but his focus seemed fixed. Band members exchanged glances, sensing the shift in their leader's energy. Joe Esposito, Elvis's road manager, leaned forward from the wings. Watching carefully, Anna placed her hand over her mother's, whispering, "Don't give up. Maybe he'll help." Marlene's eyes brimmed. She had dreamed of hearing Elvis live for decades, but never imagined becoming part of the story. Yet right here, in the middle of the Hilton's glitz, her struggle was now center stage, whether she wanted it or not. The murmurs grew louder. A woman at a nearby table called out softly, "Let her through." A man snapped back, "We can't all stop the show for one person." Their words clashed, echoing the divide in the room. Elvis sang on, but the words blurred under the weight of the moment. The crowd's energy, once unified in adoration, now simmered with uncertainty. Would compassion derail the spectacle, or would silence smother dignity? As the final chorus hit, Elvis's gaze fixed again on Marlene. The light caught his eyes, narrowing with focus. His voice held steady, but his body leaned toward the aisle as if pulled by something stronger than music. The guard, sensing the direction of the king's glance, stiffened, almost bracing himself. He had enforced the rule, but what if the star himself decided otherwise? The last note of the song thundered through the Hilton, followed by roaring applause. Yet beneath the clapping, a current of expectation hummed. Elvis lowered the mic slightly, his chest rising with breath. Everyone in that room knew a decision was coming, and in a place built on spectacle, the most unforgettable act would not be sung, but chosen. The applause still thundered as Elvis lowered the microphone. For a heartbeat, he stood motionless, shoulders rising with steady breaths. Then his hand lifted, a small gesture, but enough to halt the band. The orchestra, trained to follow him without question, fell silent mid. The sudden quiet was startling. The Hilton showroom, moments ago alive with clapping and cheers, went dead silent. Glasses clinked once, then stilled. Every eye turned toward the stage, wondering why the king had interrupted the flow of a flawless set. "Elvis never stops mid-show," someone whispered from the back. But he had. He tilted his head toward the aisle, eyes fixed on the wheelchair caught in the carpet. Slowly, he set the microphone back on its stand. The soft click of the mic echoed louder than any brass note had before. "Hold it," Elvis said, his voice calm but resolute. Marlene froze. Anna's breath caught in her throat. The guard at the aisle stiffened, uncertainty flashing across his face. With short, deliberate steps, Elvis moved away from center stage. Sequins on his jumpsuit glinted with every stride, the spotlight following as if tethered to him. Each footfall echoed across the room, sharper than the applause that had filled it moments earlier. The crowd murmured, but no one dared interrupt. In a space designed for spectacle, this unscripted silence felt heavier than any song. Elvis reached the edge of the stage, crouched slightly, and looked directly at Marlene. His voice softened, carrying across the hushed room. "Ma'am, what's your name?" "Marlene," she whispered, barely audible. He nodded once, then turned to the guard. "Let her through." The words landed like a commandment. The guard hesitated, torn between protocol and Presley's authority. But hesitation lasted only a second. He stepped aside. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Elvis lifted a hand again, calming them. "Easy, folks," he said, smiling faintly. "She's waited long enough." Anna pushed, this time with space cleared. Slowly, the chair rolled forward. Stagehands moved instinctively, creating a ramp with wooden boards at the side of the stage. Elvis extended his hand, steady and sure. Marlene trembled as she placed her palm in his. The room inhaled as one, holding the moment like fragile glass. And then, with the king's help, she was lifted onto the stage. The applause broke like a wave, crashing into ovation. People stood, tears streaking cheeks, hands clapping until they stung. What happened next was no longer about music. It was about a choice to stop everything for the sake of one fan. The spotlight followed. Elvis as he guided Marlene's wheelchair onto the platform. The crowd, still on its feet, clapped in rhythm, a roar that seemed to lift her higher than the ramp itself. For the first time in her life, Marlene wasn't just watching a concert, she was part of the show. Elvis leaned close, his hand still resting lightly on hers. "Welcome," he said, with a smile that carried warmth, not pity. The words reached her ears as if meant only for her. Though nearly 2,000 people listened in awe, stagehands stepped back, giving her space. Anna, now standing at the edge of the stage, wiped tears from her face, mouthing, "Thank you." Elvis nodded toward her, then turned back to the audience. "This lady here," he said into the microphone, his voice steady, "came a long way to be with us tonight. Let's make sure she feels at home." The Hilton showroom erupted. Applause thundered. Some fans shouted Marlene's name, having caught it from her earlier whisper. Others simply cheered louder, their voices blending into one living force of approval. Elvis draped a white scarf around her neck, one he had just used to wipe his brow. The gesture sent the audience into another frenzy. Scarves were tokens fans treasured, but tonight he gave one to her alone. Marlene clutched the fabric, eyes shimmering. For years she had collected his records, cut clippings from magazines, and dreamed of moments like this. But nothing in her imagination matched the reality of Elvis Presley standing beside her, treating her as though she belonged there all along. Isn't it remarkable how a single act of kindness can transform not just one life, but the energy of an entire room? The orchestra struck a soft chord, almost instinctively underscoring the scene. Elvis turned back to the band and gave a small nod. Instead of launching into the next number, he leaned into the mic. "We're gonna slow it down a bit," he said. "This one's for Marlene." He began a ballad, his voice gentler now, almost conversational. The crowd hushed, swaying to the melody. Every lyric wrapped around Marlene like a blanket, the music no longer distant but anchored in her presence. Anna clasped her hands at the stage's edge, overcome by the sight of her mother not just included, but honored. Fans nearby wept openly, some holding tissues, others holding strangers' hands. As the final notes drifted into silence, Elvis turned to Marlene once more. "Thank you for sharing this stage with me," he said softly. The audience exploded, ovation rolling like thunder. People knew they were witnessing more than entertainment. They were witnessing humanity, and in that moment, Elvis wasn't just the king of rock and roll, he was the king of compassion. But what would the world remember of this act once the lights dimmed and the night was over? The ovation slowly gave way to murmurs that buzzed through the Hilton showroom like static. People leaned across tables, whispering about what they had just seen. For some, it was the highlight of their entire trip to Las Vegas. For others, it was proof that Elvis was more than a performer. He was a man who noticed the overlooked photographers stationed near the stage clicked rapidly, capturing the moment from every angle. Marlene clutching the scarf, Elvis's hand resting gently on her shoulder, Anna wiping tears from her cheeks. The next morning, the Las Vegas Review-Journal ran a photo with the headline, "Elvis brings wheelchair fan to stage show stopped." Hearts lifted. Other papers picked up the story, reprinting it across Nevada, California, and beyond. Fans who had been present sent letters to relatives, describing the moment in shaky handwriting. Some even enclosed napkins, ticket stubs, or cigarette packs scribbled with the date, August 12, 1972. These keepsakes became artifacts of remembrance, proof that compassion had taken the spotlight that night. Back home in California, Marlene kept her scarf and the signed Hilton program in a wooden frame above the fireplace. Visitors would often pause to stare, asking, "Is that really from Elvis?" And she would nod, retelling the story with a glow in her voice that never dulled. Anna recalled years later, "He gave my mother more than a memory. He gave her dignity. He made her feel seen in front of thousands." Even Hilton staff spoke of it long after. A waiter named Gerald remembered clearing glasses that night. "When the room went silent, I thought something was wrong. Then I saw him walk off the stage, and I knew I'd never forget it." The ripple spread further than the walls of the Hilton. Fan clubs shared the story in newsletters, recounting it alongside set lists and costume descriptions. It became a tale passed down almost like scripture, proof that Elvis's legend was not built on voice alone, but on the pauses between songs, the moments where humanity cut through spectacle. Isn't it true that the moments we remember most aren't always the ones designed to impress, but the ones that surprise us with kindness? For Marlene, that evening defined the rest of her life. The framed program outlasted her, later resting in her daughter's home. A daily reminder of what dignity looks like when someone chooses compassion over protocol. Visitors still pause, still ask about the scarf, still marvel at the photo yellowed with time, and all of them hear the same conclusion. One compassionate pause in front of 1,900 people changed forever how a fan and a family remembered the King Dot. But beyond the Carter's home, what deeper truth would this moment leave for everyone who heard of it? Long after the lights dimmed and the Hilton showroom emptied, that single act lingered like an echo. Elvis had sung countless nights, played to millions, and broken records that would stand for decades. Yet what people remembered from August 12, 1972, wasn't just a song. It was a pause. The pause that turned the spotlight from himself onto someone who thought she would always remain in the shadows. The pause that told nearly 2,000 witnesses that compassion was greater than protocol, and dignity greater than spectacle. In every life, there are aisles we get stuck in, rules, routines, barriers built without our measure. And there are always crowds deciding whether to look away or to make space. That night, Elvis reminded the world that the measure of greatness is not the stage you stand on, but the hand you extend to someone else. Isn't it worth asking ourselves, when silence falls in our own lives, will we notice the one waiting at the margins? For Marlene, the answer was yes. For Anna, it was yes. For the thousands in that Hilton showroom, the answer still echoes in memory. And for anyone who hears the story, the challenge remains. One pause, one hand, can change everything. Stories like this remind us that the greatest stages are built on compassion. If this moment moved you, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and tell us below, when have you seen one small pause change everything? Your voice might inspire the next act of dignity.